Ourselves in jeopardy in terms of letting games get out of control like the last few have. And so, we can certainly work at controlling that and doing much better going into that skid. We were really ranked sixth in the country in the turnover margin. Right now, I'm not sure where we're at, but we're down a ways now, and so that's been big. Um, the We've been inconsistent, with our running attack. Although this last ball game was 299 yards running, I think is more what we're after. The throwing, again, if you look at the interceptions in the last two ball games, that's been critical. Something that we didn't have in the earlier games, and that's been huge in terms of what's happened to us the last certainly the last two. Injuries continue to mount. We're not the same team that we put on the field at the beginning of the year that we're putting on now. In several cases, we're playing with depth. In some cases, we've actually lost the depth, and so you look at the linebacker spot. We're playing with seven linebackers, actually six, because Quentin was not able to play. Went out, I think, somewhere around the 11th play of the defensive play of the Western game, and so a lot of young, inexperienced players on the field. Now, what does that mean? Number one, it probably means they're going to have mistakes. But number two, that means we need to adjust as coaches and make sure that we simplify to a point where we know we're playing with young, inexperienced players, and we need to make sure that we give them their best chance when they're on the field. The safety position, we are really beat up at the safety position. Losing Devin Bass, has an effect because he could actually play safety and corner for you, and he can also be a nickel player. So you start to add all that together. We're banged up in the defensive line. Some of these guys are playing banged up, which almost every football team has guys that are banged up. Certainly at this point in time, and that's what's expected. You need to play when you're banged up. Now, obviously, if there's a serious injury, then a guy's not on the field. But we've had guys that have been on the field for a while and have tried to play with their injury, and it just hasn't worked at a real high level. So trying to give you kind of an overall picture of where we're at, why we're at where we're at, and again, some of those factors we can control as coaches and we can control as players. I think the thing that I do like is I don't think our football team has given up in any ball game, but we have got to learn to play. This team right now has got to learn how to play better in the second half, and needs to find ways to win games in the second half, and so that's critical for us to make sure that we put them in position mentally and physically to get things done. Okay, that's a long introduction, but go ahead.
It's tough at this time of the season, obviously, with 3 games left in the regular season to do a full evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
But in a quick turnaround and with the number of games left, what can you do from a play calling standpoint, from a personnel standpoint, to get the offense get back to where you think it can be?
Well, in this last ball game, we did put some points on the board. Obviously, not enough. But if you look at our drives and what took us out of drives, we should have been in the 40s in terms of points scored. And obviously, if you're in the 40s and points scored, that's going to be less opportunity for the other team to score as quickly, and you're in that ball game, and then it becomes a different ball game. And so I think you know, I think you saw a little bit. You know, this was the first time I think that Darius was healthy with his ankle to where we could run him, and you saw JD when he came in was able to run effectively, and that's a part of our offense. We went through a stretch there where we weren't able to run the quarterback, and so that takes away some of what you're all about offensively. We got to take care of the ball like we did in the first so many games. You know, as I mentioned, the last 2 games we had 6 turnovers. 3 of those turnovers went for touchdowns the other way. You know, you can't be in ball games and win ball games with that happening. We have not gained a turnover in 3 games. That difference there is huge in putting yourself in position to even have a chance to win. So that's got to be turned around. Then we got to do a better job, I think, of finishing some drives off. We hurt ourselves with some penalties, and then there were, you know, there was a time or two that you know, we're in the red zone and we just did not do a great job. Either a turnover or a penalty or something kept us from getting points on the board. You know, we were able to take maybe at least two more field goal attempts if we wanted to, but we went for touchdowns because of the situation of the game. So if we could have got ourselves in the 40s in that game, which was certainly possible, then coming down the stretch would have been a much better ball game and one that maybe could have went either way. Now they're an excellent football team. They've got tremendous skill players, and again, I think as good a quarterback as there is around. I mean, he throws the deep ball as good as anybody I've seen. I mean, he not only puts it where his player has a chance to make a great catch, he puts it where if that receiver is covered, then you as a DB, you really don't have a chance to break it up. And even though you're in good position, you really don't have a chance to break it up. And then that leads to interference calls, and you know, and that comes into the game. Now, getting back to your original question, I think we need to go deep more. You know, I think that's something that we can try to do. You know, if you look at the big and explosive plays, it was 20-20, but they had almost 100 yards more on their big and explosive plays, 20 plays, than what we did on our explosive and big plays. So we probably need to go deep a little bit more. You know, running the ball is something that you know, you can control teams if they can't run the ball. No matter how good a passing game they've got, they're still going to have trouble. Bowling Green was able to end up doing both, and they've done both fairly well. You know, they run the ball well enough, and obviously what they do passing wise opens up their running game a little bit. But you know, we're looking at how we can modify some things to help our younger players and inexperienced players that are on the field. If we do that as coaches, we can help our team. So that's our plan.
You mentioned the second half. Is that because, like, kind of struggling to win games late? Is that because guys are getting hurt in the first half? Is that adjustments? Is there any?
You know, there's probably not one simple answer to that. It's probably multidimensional in terms of what's happening to us. Obviously, we've got a number of guys that are playing banged up, and as the game goes on, you know, you saw that some of those guys, you know, just wore down and they couldn't finish, you know, or they'd have to come out for a while, and then you'd have to, you know, then they'd say they're okay, and so you put them back in, but they're not really at the top of their game, and so, you know, that certainly is had an effect, but you know, injuries can never be an excuse. You know, once you start using injuries as an excuse, you're not doing anybody a favor, yourself, your team, your coaches, and so we have never used injuries as an excuse. But obviously, when they accumulate to a point, that does hurt what the continuity that you're all about. You know, we tried to cut down on reps this year because we didn't want the injuries, and so our practice isn't as long, and we're not getting quite as many reps. And what does that mean? That means your second and third team guys don't get as many reps, and so in terms of bringing them along, they come along slower, and so that's a problem. There's a way to combat that. But that can be a problem in terms of just getting everybody the amount of reps so that if they're needed and they're used, that they're able to fill in and get it done at a high level.
What can you update us on Darius's status?
Questionable for the week. Mm-hmm.
How would you assess how Greg played after being out for a month and a half?
Greg or
not Greg,
JD?
I'm sorry, misspoke.
I thought pretty well. Obviously, he wants to take back the interception for the TD. That's always something that hits quarterbacks between the eyes. But he did a lot of good things. I thought he made some really nice throws at times, and I thought he ran the ball at times. He just needs to get used to the buzz around you when you're a quarterback and going through the reads and getting the ball where it's supposed to get, making sure that if you are out of the pocket, it's because you legitimately have been flushed out and you're not just beating the gun there in terms of jumping out. And he made some plays on the run, and I think he's doing better at that. But that's, that there's things that everybody can improve in their game. And the things that he needs to improve, he's working on. He has really good natural ability. And the other things he just needs to work at to get those refined to where it complements his natural skill.
Do you get the sense that you have to try to keep the mood light and positive, or do you get the sense from your team that they're still okay from that standpoint, from an emotional standpoint? It could go either way at this time.
Sure. Yeah, it definitely can. And that's part of coaching, is as a head coach, your assistants who deal with their position guys every day, and that's part of coaching, is to mentally make sure that you don't let a team just fall off course to where they can't get back on course, and we can get back on course. There's no question about it. And we play a team in Kent that's one or two in the major categories in terms of defensive football in the conference. And their national statistic, it holds up. They're really a good football team, and traditionally they've played good defense there. They've used two quarterbacks. So looks like they might, coming out of this game, be settling on one maybe. But obviously they have the ability to really slow teams down and hold the point production to where they can win football games. And so I think that's a credit to their staff and to their whole team as to what they were able to do. And you look at that Buffalo game, that if it wasn't for a few, I'm not going to call them fluke, but for a few plays, they had that game won. And so obviously they did a great job of limiting Buffalo to what was it, 18 points, but really that 18 points wasn't a true 18 points in terms of how it was gotten, and then they had put themselves in position to win, but it just didn't happen. And so they have a lot of spirit. They play hard every game, every play. They're a good group of football players.
They had a situation last night where there was a key player on the defensive side that was ejected. Jordan Italiano won't play for the first half against you guys on Tuesday night. I don't want you to comment on that sort of stuff, but you obviously have been on committees with penalties and infractions and that sort of thing, and it's happened to you guys this year
Mhm,
too.
mhm.
Do you think that the targeting rules and how that's enforced and all of that will be revisited in the off season? A lot of coaches have said that they would like to see that. Would you like to see that too?
Yeah, I'm all for safety of players, and I think coaches are for the safety of the player. But sometimes there's inadvertent hits that it's pretty difficult to determine what the intent was and how that all worked. And the wording of it, there's a lot of questions coming up, not only about the contact rule, but the replays and how that works. The big glowing one obviously is the Duke game, and so coaches aren't bashful about bringing things up and talking about them. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussion on several topics.
Kent's defense, what makes them effective this year? What stands out when you're watching them in there?
I think they play really good team defense. You don't see breakdowns. You don't see a guy not getting his job done or being in position to get his job done. And when that happens, offenses struggle. And I think they will blitz you. They've got good team speed, and so they'll come after you. They've got good corners, and that to where they feel good about just having those guys lined up man on man on you out there, and so an aggressive defense that's backed up by a good secondary, I think makes you a good defensive unit generally, and I think they've been a good defensive unit for a long time now. I think certainly the coaches there have done a great job.
You kind of mentioned this after the game Wednesday. You're not worried about a bowl game right now. You just want to see better football on Tuesday night. You're not thinking any further past that.
Yeah, if we hit a bowl game, it'll be because we earn it. Right now, we haven't earned it, and so what we're interested in is getting back to playing our best football and let things fall where they may. We have not played our best football in the last 3 games. We played quality opponents, but we've not played our best football. And as I talked to you guys or mentioned to you guys earlier about, there's several factors involved there. Some we can control, some we can't. We just move forward. I know I'm excited to get back out there, and because I know the potential of our football team, and I truly believe they're excited to get back on the field and get going again. And so those the losses don't sit very easily. If they do, you're in the wrong sport. I don't know. Maybe there's no sport where losses sit easily, but certainly this can get tough on you as a player, as a coach, if you're not playing the way you're capable of playing. And again, sometimes you feel like you're trying to cover all the bases. Maybe you can do a better job of that, and maybe we can find a way to piece things back together to where we end up playing our best football coming down the stretch.
The last couple seasons, you've had good starts, and then they kind of trail off.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're 4-8 in November the last two or 3 years. Is there any reason why this has popped up?
Well, I think if you go back and look, and I just got done telling you that injuries are not an excuse, but if you go back the last 3 or so years, I can't remember more off-season surgeries, more injuries that have occurred maybe in fall camp, and this is even before the season gets started. Kylan Nelson, a guy that you guys probably don't even think about anymore, who returned a touchdown against Miami last year to get us back to where we got going and won that game. Tremendous explosive player. Hardly played at all. Played in some earlier games, but his injury kept him from being at top speed, and then finally it made sense to him have surgery. Troy Mangin, who I think will be one of the better tight ends in the conference, didn't get to play down, and so some of that happens early, and it's part of the game. But if it keeps happening, it does have an effect on your football team. And but then, like I've been mentioning, you've got to find a way to overcome all that. And as coaches and as players, you can do that. That can happen. And so that's what we're going to set out to do.
With all the preventative measures you took in the offseason to prevent these injuries, does it almost feel like you guys are just a little snake bitten just with the way the injuries have hit you?
Yeah. Some of it, you can't control injuries, certainly, but you can control the position you put your players in practice and those kind of things that can help once the game starts. And that's where, you look at our injuries now, they've come in games. It's this season. It's not been in practice. Some of them were carryovers. You look at Nate Carpenter. He's been nursing his injuries still through this season. And so he's really not been 100% a great football player for us, a great leader. A ball hawking kind of guy in the secondary is and so you have enough of that, it can come back to hurt you. We've had our fair share of that over the last 3 years, but good football teams, good coaches find a way to overcome it.
Coach, you mentioned that getting some inexperienced players that'll be able to get some time at the end of the season. Is that a positive out of this, and does that benefit you guys heading into as you look ahead to next year? The season.
Yeah, I guess you can look at it that way. I'm a day-by-day guy. I'm not looking to build our football team for next season. I'm looking to win the game at hand and to practice every day in a manner that's going to allow us to be the best player we can be, the best team we can be. So I'm just a day-by-day guy. I do not look at how that will affect us next year. Obviously, if you have a bunch of guys coming back with experience, that's always a plus. But as long as it's been good experience.